Alright, it's priced higher than pretty much all your premium fans, those usual suspects. And it worked great on the C14S, but then I tested this one out on Rad. Welcome to Machines and More. I'm going to give you a complete review here of the Cooler Master Mobius 120 OC. Last year I did review the first iteration of the Mobius fans. This is the Mobius 120. The two I had to test at the time, those were the RGB ones, so I won't compare to those fans today. These are a premium performance-oriented fan, and they're positioned as competition to the best 120mm, 25mm fans, like your NFA 12x25s, your Silent Wings 4 Pro, and those P12 Maxes. They were released right around the same time, and so that's what we'll be comparing to as well. So Cooler Master did provide these fans for testing. I tested initially in the last review as a single fan on the heatsink, since I only had one of these, and they did eventually send over an extra so that I could test on a 240, so big thanks to them. This review, of course, is not sponsored by the manufacturer or any of the competing products here. Similar to all product reviews here on the channel, they are a product of independent testing and independent research. I did release some testing results on the C14S as tested in the formed T1 reference edition. These fans are very competitive. In fact, on a heatsink, these blew the Noctuas out of the water, and very impressive there. Quick specs, this is another ultra high RPM fan. There seems like so many have been released recently. The max on this one is 3,200 RPM on the highest mode switch setting, and then depending on how you position that mode switch, it can either top out at 1,500 or 2,400 RPM on low or medium respectively. The switch is located on the fan cable, which is encased in a pretty good feeling fabric covering. Depending on your setup, this could be a good or bad thing, the mode switch that is. I prefer this switch on the cable because when the switch is on the exhaust side of the fan, like some fans have it, well, you won't be able to access the fan at all if it's mounted to push air through a rad or a case or heatsink. Whereas with this cable design here, you can at least attempt to place it somewhere accessible when you're mounting or installing it. One thing you will want to keep an eye out for, especially if you're at the max RPM setting, is how you set your fan curves. Because at 44%, these were at 2,000 RPM. At 20%, these were at 1,550 RPM. And at 7%, these were at 1,280 RPM. So it is quite a progressive PWM curve here. The bearing here, it's a dual ball bearing system. It's different than the loop dynamic bearing compared when we compare to the Mobius 120, and these are PWM fans as well. The slightly bluish blades feature Cooler Master's ring blade design, which means that the blades are interconnected with this ring at the tips, and that's similar to the design on the P12 Max. You do have 9 blades here, and there's quite a few, and you've got this visible brass center, very similar to the Noctua. You have rubber dampeners on the corner. These will require an Allen key for removal, so they're not toolless. It does feel like a premium fan, and there's good heft to it, although you're not usually using a fan by hefting it, but there is a good dampened feel. And compared to the Mobius 120, the regular one, this one definitely has more of a dampened feel, more weight to it, and this one just feels lighter weight, less premium construction there. Packaging here, it's got a premium appearance similar to Noctua's and Be Quiet's high-end offerings. But unlike the goodies that are included with the NFA 12x25, such as a rad gasket and adapter cables, this one just comes with 4 fan screws and anti-vibration rubber mats, so it's a little bit more simple that way. Just to review the performance, let's take a look again at the heatsink performance, and these were very good, and I was surprised to see how well it performed in this scenario. So if you are planning on deploying on a heatsink, especially a single one, and you want max performance, these are very compelling other than the price, as well as there's a potential noise issue that I'll discuss here shortly. Mounted on a heatsink though, it's kind of a different story. I am testing it in the high RPM mode since I am trying to span the entire RPM range. CPU here is the 5800X, and the AIO I'm using is the Cooler Master PL240 Flux. It is the same setup as the other fans tested here, and this is all noise normalized testing with the exception of the maximum RPM, which I'll just give you the noise level for. I will caveat that this is measured noise because there is a bit of a perceived noise issue with these fans that I will get to after the thermal testing results. At the same noise level, these do run faster than the Noctuas. At the lower noise, low RPM level on this liquid-cooled application, not too bad. They're not better than the Noctuas though, and they are just a tad better than the Be Quiet. So very disparate results compared to how they performed on the heatsink. Continuing on at a medium RPM level, the performance here falls behind that of other fans quite a bit, despite their spinning at a tie for fastest level, which is on par with the Noctuas. They are behind even the Montech metals here. At a high noise, high RPM level, these are at 2020 RPM now. Consider this noise level to be where most fans will top out and where you really shouldn't consider running faster on a regular basis, especially for a liquid-cooled application. We're not seeing too much improvement in the hierarchy, and they are tied with a much better priced fan in the Montechs. When we max out the fan, the measured noise, it is a bit better than the Arctic P12 Max with slightly worse performance. On a CPU like the 5800X, there's not a huge reason to need such a high RPM on a regular basis. For a bit quieter, you only sacrifice a bit of performance on a fan like the Be Quiet Silentwings 4 Pro. So on a radiator, I'd say they're a little bit disappointing compared to how well they performed on a heatsink, but the static pressure and airflow dynamics of fan designs, they often translate to differing performance qualities in varying scenarios. Acoustics though, one thing I did notice about this fan, it has a strange buzzing noise, presumably from the bearing that a decibel meter doesn't pick up. And it's really perceptible at 1500 RPM. And I think it has to do more with the fact that the inherent fan noise isn't as high at that point to overpower that buzzing noise. But going from 1200 RPM to 1500 RPM, you definitely hear that buzz amplify a little bit as well. Unfortunately, for a 240mm rad, this is going to be a pretty common RPM you will see at full CPU loads, and for a heatsink, same deal there. So take a listen and see what you think. I have seen some feedback that the P12 Max's dual ball bearing system has some odd noises at low RPMs. Now, I didn't hear that with my samples from Arctic once the RPM was stable, but with these Mobius OC fans, it's a pretty consistent noise, unfortunately. So I didn't hear this with the regular Mobius 120. This one has a dual bearing system, presumably due to that higher max RPM. So if you like this fan design, and unless you need that 2000 to 3000 RPM interval, that one, it may be a more attractive option. It's a little bit better price as well. So OC here, it is designated for that high RPM overclocking purpose, and on that front I think they are a good performer. Buzzy noise or not, at that noise level you won't really hear it, but for regular applications within 2000 RPM I think you will experience that noise. And as much as I'd consider it for the performance on a heatsink, I would still stick to NFA 12x25s in this price range. Of course, these are more expensive than the Noctuas. The price has come down quite a bit since launch. As of today, there are more digestible $35 instead of the original $41 or so, which I saw. And for a 120mm fan, that price level would have really put it into OC or overcharging territory. So I hope you found this review helpful. Please give a like if so. Subscribe if you haven't already. Links down below. Thanks for watching.